Here's what my resolution would do. It would change Senate rules to provide that when we are in a shutdown, that senators cannot be paid.
Is there an objection? The objection is heard.
And if a member of this body disagrees with what I'm doing, then by God, they ought to come down here and stand up in front of the United States Senate and stand up in front of the American people and stand up in front of God and stand up in front of country and stand up in front of all these people, these good people that aren't being paid, and say, here's why.
What you just watched wasn't just a tense exchange. It was a moment that exposed everything wrong with Washington. Because while government shutdowns leave everyday Americans without pay, the people responsible for the chaos, they still get paid. So Senator John Kennedy proposed something simple: no pay for senators during a shutdown. Sounds obvious, right? But the moment he pushed it forward, Senator Brian Schatz stepped in to block it and then walked away without explaining why. Watch what happened next.
Mr. President, I have a resolution that I've talked about before. I want to emphasize that it's not a bill. Could I ask for order, Mr. President?
Can I order in the chamber?
I want to emphasize, Mr. President, that it is a resolution. It's not a bill. I also want to emphasize at the outset that it only applies to the Senate. It only applies to the United States Senate. And here's what my resolution would do. It would change Senate rules to provide that when we are in a shutdown, that senators cannot be paid, cannot receive their salaries. Their checks would be, think of it this way, Mr. President, locked in a vault. And once the shutdown is over, the senators could pick them up. This resolution, again, it's not a bill, is about shared sacrifice. And I'm not doing it to punish anybody. I'm not doing it to try to embarrass anybody. I recognize that there are varying degrees of wealth among United States senators and their ability to go without a paycheck. I know, and like every member of this body, and every member of this body has grown, who has a substantial amount of wealth, has achieved that wealth through their own hard work. And most, if not all of them, started with nothing. And you know what I say? God bless them. More power to them. That's America. So I want to put that up front because I'm sure that some are going to point out that some of our members are wealthier than others. And it's true. But this bill isn't about that. It's about shared sacrifice and sending a message. We've got about 1 squillion employees at the Department of Homeland Security that aren't being paid. And there is no prospect of them being paid. Before I yield to my colleague, Senator Marino, I want to point this out. I said it yesterday, but I'm going to say it again. The party line among us is that we're that close to reaching a deal, to which I respond, a deal to get government back open, to which I respond respectfully, dream weaver, okay? I don't believe it. I hope I'm wrong. I know Mr. Holman is now involved. He's good, but he can't work miracles. I do not believe, because of the faction of my friend's party, my Democratic friend's party that is in control, that my Democratic colleagues can vote for anything that could be interpreted as helping ICE. I just think that's political and policy reality. What I think we should do, as I said yesterday, and Senator Cruz has talked about this eloquently, I want to give him full credit. The Democrats have offered to open every part of DHS except ICE. I would gratefully accept their offer. Let's get them open, immediately. And then the very next day, we should start a budget resolution through reconciliation. We should pass a budget for the rest of ICE, the rest of the DHS. It's not open. Now, I would welcome my Democratic friends' involvement in that, but I know they can't vote for it. I really think we ought to surprise ourselves, Mr. President, and do something intelligent if we really want to get this government back open. We could have it open within a week. The Democrats I think, will find that acceptable, and I believe Republicans will find that acceptable. That once again, this is a resolution that just affects the Senate. It doesn't affect the House. Senator Moreno is well aware, as am I, and every member of this body, that this is a bipartisan resolution. To change the Senate rules, I had to go to the Rules Committee. My resolution, our resolution, passed the Rules Committee unanimously. Every single Republican and every single Democrat voted for this resolution. What I hear Senator Moreno saying in a very eloquent way, yes, there are varying degrees of wealth in this chamber, but we all make $170 grand a year. And that's a fortune for most Americans. I'm not saying that senators don't earn that. This bill's not meant to punish anybody. I know some senators who work so hard that 170 grand a year is probably equivalent to about $11 an hour. I mean, they're working all the time. This isn't about that. This is about shared values. This is about sending a message to our colleagues at TSA and elsewhere in DHS that we understand that we're trying to get government back open. But in the meantime, we're going to try in our small way to share your experience. But honestly, I don't see how any one of my colleagues can disagree with either the spirit or the letter of this resolution. So, Mr. President, as if in legislative session, and notwithstanding Rule 22, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the consideration of calendar number 296, SRES 526, which Senator Moreno and I have just talked about. And further, that the resolution be agreed to and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there an objection? The objection is heard.
With respect, I want to give my colleague, Senator Schatz, more time. As he objected and left the chamber, is he coming back?
Is it appropriate for someone not to be recognized to just say, I object and run out? The senator's not been recognized. The senator had the floor, the senator from Louisiana, who's made a proposal, and then I heard some noise in the background, and that was it. But I never heard a senator being recognized, so it sounds to me that no one has been recognized to object.
The chair cannot answer that.
Okay. May I inquire why not, sir?
Not opine on why a senator is in the chamber or not in the chamber.
Can you opine on why my colleague objected and then immediately left, and whether he's coming back?
Not an appropriate parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. President, my parliamentary inquiry is a bit different than that. I never heard a senator recognized from the chair by the President of the Senate. The President of the Senate, you had the senator from Louisiana had the floor. The presiding officer said, "Is there objection?" At which time, routinely, someone seeks recognition on the floor.
And the objection was heard.
The senator does not need the floor to.
The senator does not need the floor to object.
All right, I'm coming back, Mr. President. And I'm coming back, and I'm coming back, and I'm coming back. Did I mention I'll be back? And if a member of this body disagrees with what I'm doing, then by God, they ought to come down here and stand up in front of the United States Senate and stand up in front of the American people and stand up in front of God and stand up in front of country and stand up in front of all these people, these good people that aren't being paid, and say, here's why.
At the center of this crisis is the Department of Homeland Security, the agency responsible for border security, disaster response, and national safety. But this isn't just about a budget. It's about power, policy, and the future of immigration enforcement in America. And according to Senator Kennedy, it's politics in its rawest form. Because the consequences are already hitting hard. Airport lines are growing longer. TSA agents are working without pay. Disaster response departments like FEMA are stretched thin. Even cybersecurity operations are under pressure. And yet, despite all of this, Washington remains completely deadlocked. Why? Because the real fight isn't over TSA or FEMA, it's over ICE. Thousands of workers, from frontline agents to support staff, are being told to keep showing up without a paycheck. While the very people who can end the crisis, they're still getting paid. Business as usual. That's the backdrop for this moment. Now enters John Kennedy, a senator known for his blunt, no-frills style, stepping onto the Senate floor with a proposal that on its face sounds simple. If the government shuts down, senators shouldn't get paid either. Not permanently, not as punishment, just temporarily until they do their job and reopen the government. It's what he calls shared sacrifice. And here's where the tension really starts to build, because while the idea sounds like common sense to a lot of Americans, it quietly challenges something deeper in Washington, a culture where accountability often feels optional. Kennedy's argument cuts straight to that nerve. How can lawmakers justify collecting $170,000 salaries while hundreds of thousands of federal workers are left in limbo? From his perspective, this isn't about partisanship, it's about credibility. If Congress wants the public to trust them to solve crises, they should at least be willing to feel a fraction of the pressure themselves. But the resistance he runs into tells its own story. A lone objection came quickly, from Senator Brian Schatz. He raises an opposing motion and quickly races outside the Senate chambers. And what should be a straightforward vote turns into a confusing back and forth over Senate rules, raising a bigger question than the resolution itself. Is the system designed to fix problems or to avoid accountability for them? Kennedy clearly believes it's the latter, and whether you agree with him or not, his point lands with a lot of force. In the real world, if you don't do your job, you don't get paid. In Washington, that standard doesn't always seem to apply. That's the disconnect he's trying to expose. So